My name is Anna Reeves. I am 38 years old, and I almost destroyed my marriage over something I did not understand. I want to tell you that clearly at the beginning, because the story I'm about to tell you could easily be told as a story about a husband who did something suspicious, and that framing would be wrong. It would be accurate in the narrow sense. The facts taken individually would support it, but it would miss what was actually happening, which was something I am not sure I have words for even now, 2 years later, sitting at my kitchen table trying to find the right ones. My husband's name is Daniel. He is 41 years old. He is the kind of man who fixes things before you ask him to. The loose hinge, the flickering bulb, the sound the dryer makes on its third cycle. He notices things. He is not a talker. Not in the way I mean when I say Lily talks, not the kind of person who fills silence with words for the sake of filling it. He chooses what he says. When he says something, it lands. We have been married for 11 years. We have two children, Sophie, who is 12, and Ben, who is 9. We live in a house with a small backyard that Daniel has been converting, very slowly, into a garden. Progress is measured in seasons. This does not bother him. He is a person who can hold a long timeline. I tell you all of this because I want you to understand who Daniel is before I tell you what I thought about him for 3 months last winter. The Sunday calls started, I later learned, in January of the year before last. I noticed them in October. That is a 9-month gap between when something was happening and when I began to see it, which is a fact I have had to sit with. Here is what I noticed. Every Sunday morning between roughly 9 and 10, Daniel would take his phone and go to the garage. Not every single Sunday, not with a rigidity that would have been obvious, but consistently enough that by October I had begun to track it without meaning to. He would say he was going to check on something in the garage, or he would simply go and he would come back 30 or 40 minutes later, and he would not say where he had been or what he had been doing. We have a one-car garage. There is nothing in it that requires 40 minutes of attention on a Sunday morning. I noticed, and then I noticed that I was noticing, and then the noticing became something else. I want to be honest about what I thought. I think honesty is the only reason to tell a story like this. I thought, he is talking to someone he does not want me to know about. I thought, this has been happening for months. I thought, in the particular silence of 3 a.m., when thoughts arrive fully formed and merciless. What if it is a woman? I did not ask him. I know that sounds strange. I have thought about why I didn't ask him, and the answer I keep arriving at is this. I was afraid of the answer. Not afraid that it would confirm something terrible. Afraid that asking would mean acknowledging that the thought existed at all, that I had spent months constructing a suspicion about a man who had given me no reason for suspicion beyond going to the garage on Sunday mornings. So instead I watched. I noted the frequency. I counted the Sundays. I tried once, in November, to walk casually through the garage while he was out there. I told myself I needed something from the shelf near the door, and I saw him from behind, phone to his ear, shoulders slightly forward, the posture of someone in a conversation that requires attention. He didn't hear me come in. I stood there for perhaps 4 seconds. Then I went back inside. I heard, in those 4 seconds, his voice. He was saying, I know it's hard, but you're doing it. You're still doing it. I went back inside and stood in the kitchen and felt the floor shift under me. I told myself, for 2 more weeks, that it could be anything. A friend in trouble, a colleague, a family member he was keeping a confidence for. I told myself the words I had heard. I know it's hard, you're doing it, you're still doing it, could be said to anyone in any difficult situation. I told myself this while not sleeping, while watching him across the dinner table and seeing a person I recognized completely and suddenly did not recognize it all. In December, I asked him. We were in the kitchen after the children were in bed. I had not planned what I was going to say. I just sat down at the table and said, "Daniel, who do you talk to on Sunday mornings in the garage?" He looked at me. I watched his face very carefully. I know Daniel's face. I have been watching it for 11 years, through grief and joy and exhaustion and ordinary Tuesday evenings, and the specific expression he makes when something moves him that he does not want to show. I know his face. What I saw was not guilt. What I saw was something I can only describe as the look of a person who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just been asked if they'd like to put it down. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you remember Kara's mom?" I stopped breathing. Kara. Kara was Sophie's best friend from 2nd grade through 4th grade. They met on the first day of 2nd grade and were inseparable within a week. The kind of friendship that happens at that age with the speed and totality of a natural event that takes over everything. That means sleepovers every other weekend and notes in each other's lunchboxes and a private language of references that parents are not fully admitted to. Kara died in April of Sophie's 4th grade year. An accident, sudden, complete, the kind of thing that happens in a sentence and then takes years to understand. She was 9 years old. She had brown hair in 2 braids and a collection of miniature horses and a laugh that you could hear from 2 rooms away. Sophie did not speak for 4 days after. Not a word. She sat in her room with the door open and we did not push her. We sat near her and waited. On the 5th day, she came downstairs and sat at the breakfast table and ate cereal and said, "Can I have a different bowl? I don't like this one." And we understood that this was how she was going to come back to us, through something ordinary, through the bowl, through the small specific objects of daily life. Kara's mother's name is Helen. I had met Helen probably 30 or 40 times over those 2 years. School events, pickups, the birthday parties, the 2 occasions she and I had sat at her kitchen table while our daughters played upstairs and talked the way parents talk. About school, about the logistics of children, about the fragments of our own lives that fit into those conversations. We were friendly, we were not close. After Kara died, I brought food to her house twice. I attended the memorial. I sent a card on the 1st anniversary, then the 2nd. I had meant to do more. I had thought about calling her more times than I called. Life, I told myself. The children. Work. I would reach out properly soon. I did not reach out properly. Daniel had. He had called Helen for the first time in January, about 8 months after Kara's death. He had called because Sophie had woken in the night crying and had said, in the particular directness of a half-asleep child, "I miss Kara's mom. I want to know if she's okay." Daniel had not told me this. He had not told me because he had handled it, or begun to handle it, and had not yet decided what handling it would look like. He had called Helen the next Sunday morning. He had gone to the garage because he didn't want to disturb me, because the children were still sleeping, and he didn't want Sophie to overhear and not know what to make of it. He had expected to call once. Helen, he told me, had answered on the 2nd ring. She had started crying when she heard his voice. She had cried for a while, and then she had talked, and then she had talked more, and by the end of an hour, he hadn't realized it had been an hour, she had said, "I don't have many people who call anymore. People don't know what to say after a certain amount of time. They stop knowing how to bring it up, so they stop calling." He called the next Sunday. He called the Sunday after that. He said, "I didn't tell you because I didn't know how to explain it. It kept being the right thing to do, but I kept not knowing how to say, I've been calling Helen every week. I didn't want you to think." He stopped. I said, "Think what?" He said, that it was something other than what it was. I looked at my husband. I said, "Why didn't you just tell me?" He said, "Because at first I didn't know if it would continue." And then it continued. And the longer it continued, the stranger it would seem that I hadn't mentioned it. And then I just kept going out to the garage. I sat with that for a moment. I said, "What do you talk about?" He said, "Kara, mostly." Helen talks about Kara, what she was like, things she said, things she did. She talks about going into Kara's room. She talks about the miniature horses, how she can't move them, but she dusts them every week. She talks about what it's like to be in a grocery store and see a child who is the age Kara would be now. She talks about how everyone around her has moved forward, and she has stayed exactly where she was, and how those two things exist in the same world, and she doesn't know yet how to hold them both. Daniel said, "Mostly, I just listen." I thought about the words I had heard in the garage, standing there for 4 seconds in November. I know it's hard. You're doing it. You're still doing it. I thought about Helen, 61 years old, living alone in the house where Kara's miniature horses still stood on the shelf, dusted every week, waiting for a Sunday morning phone call from a man she barely knew, who had decided, quietly, without announcement, that she should not have to carry this without someone calling. I did not ask Daniel why he hadn't simply told me he was doing this. I understood why. There is a kind of goodness that is embarrassed by itself, that doesn't know how to be spoken about without sounding like it's being spoken about on purpose, and Daniel has always had exactly that kind of goodness. The kind that fixes the hinge before you ask. The kind that goes to the garage on Sunday mornings. I called Helen the next day. We talked for a long time. She told me about Kara. I told her about Sophie, about how Sophie still keeps a small photo of Kara in her desk drawer, face up, and touches the edge of it sometimes when she's thinking. Helen cried at that. I cried at that. We made plans to have coffee, actual plans with a date and a place, the kind we had never made when our daughters were running through the halls upstairs. We have had coffee 6 times since then. Helen has come to our house for dinner twice. She and Sophie sat on the back porch last spring, while Daniel was working in the garden, and talked for a long time in low voices. And I did not interrupt them. I don't know everything they said. I don't need to. I almost asked Daniel to stop. I want to be fully honest about that. In the worst weeks of November, when I was not sleeping, and my imagination was doing what imaginations do at 3 a.m., I had rehearsed a version of that conversation. I had been prepared, if the answer was what I feared, to ask him to stop. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table in December and found out that my husband had been spending his Sunday mornings making sure a grieving mother knew someone was thinking of her. I have thought since then about the 9 months between January and October, about all the things that happen in our lives that we don't see, not because they are hidden, but because we are not yet looking in the right direction. About the way I tracked the Sundays without asking. About the question I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answer. I should have asked sooner. He should have told me. Both of those things are true, and neither of them is the most important thing. The most important thing is this. Kara's miniature horses are still on the shelf. They get dusted every week, and on Sunday mornings the phone rings. I know because sometimes now, when Daniel goes to the garage, I make 2 cups of coffee and I bring one out, and I sit on the step, and I listen to him listen. I know it's hard, he says. You're doing it. You're still doing it. If this story stayed with you, if you watched all the way to here, please hit that like button and subscribe to Tender Heart Stories. Drop your location in the comments. USA, UK, Canada, Australia, wherever you're watching from. I read every single one. Tell me, Has someone in your life ever quietly done something good that you almost misunderstood? See you in the next one.